Good evening, wonderful people, and welcome to Asikhulume Talkshow. This is me, Pastor Mhlanga. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us once again, where we are saying, let's talk about it. We talk about issues that affect us every day, issues that affect us as a church, issues that affect us as a community, and even issues that affect us even as families. Today, we have an issue that we have been discussing in the previous episode. It is marriage, divorce, and remarriage. We have been talking about the marriage relationship, and we realize the fact that there gets to be some times where people get to have conflicts, and sometimes you see that in those conflicts, to some, they end up failing to resolve them, and they get to a point where they divorce, and some even make attempts to remarry. And so these are the issues that we continue to discuss about. And today, we continue to talk about this issue. What is marriage? When is marriage said to be marriage? Is it a good thing to divorce? If it has happened, what happens? How do you handle it? And someone will be saying, I want to remarry, but I do not know how to go about it. All these issues are what we talk about here in Asikhulume Talk Show. So to talk about this and more, I have today in the program a man called Mr. Dube. Mr. Dube is a center lawyer at Legal Resources Foundation. Mr. Dube, welcome to Asikhulume Talk Show.
Thank you, Pastor Mhlanga. Ngiyabonga ukuthi you have me today to talk to your congregants and the larger viewership.
Thank you so much. We are going to be talking about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. We want to get to it, Mr. Dube. The first question that we want to ask, and which is a question that we have asked even the other previous guests that we have had in the show, from a legal point of view, what and when is marriage said to be marriage?
Thank you. I think maybe the first point would be to explain that there are actually two types of marriages in Zimbabwe. We have Chapter 511, the civil marriage, one where you get married in court or in your church if your pastor is a marriage officer. And then you have Chapter 507, which is the African customary marriage. This one, the man can marry as many wives as he wants. But when it comes to marriages, especially Chapter 511, it's the one where you actually have to apply at the court for a marriage license, and then you have to flight what are called I think what you normally advertise here in your church is your bands that need to be called out at least 3 times before the marriage actually takes place.
Talking about that, of late we have been seeing that probably is it a change or is it a new development in terms of when a young man or a young lady intend to marry, that they've got to make an application, a license for marriage. It's a different arrangement, which for us who got married a little bit earlier before, we didn't have to do that. Maybe if you could take us through that process that people go through for them to get to a point whereby they can then be joined together.
Okay. I think with the coming of COVID, it has made the courts change a few things in order to protect the general community. So what happens now is instead of actually advertising your bands in church, because churches were banned to do gatherings and weddings, most weddings are now being done at the civil courts, either at Tredgold Magistrate Court or Western Commonage. So what happens now is you go and you apply for that marriage license where you pay a certain amount. The last time I checked, it was still 1,000 bond to apply for that license, where you then go there with your fiance, with your ID pictures and your IDs, when then fingerprints will be taken to check within the system that you've not been married before. And because what used to happen previously, you could come to Bulawayo, get a marriage license, get married, you'd go to Gwanda. you would get married. They wouldn't check your license. So you have a situation where someone could get married 2 or 3 times, whilst it was a civil marriage. So now, luckily, the system is now computerized. They check your fingerprint and your photo. So you cannot get married here and then go somewhere else. Because your ID, your picture and your fingerprint will actually sell you out.
Okay. So there has been some cases where you find people getting married in one place and they can't get married in another place.
Yes, the issue was the system was so centralized that your marriage certificate will just go to Harare, just saying Cedric Dube.
Okay.
And someone will not be able to chase up, because all you needed to do was just advertise for 3 weeks in a row. Mm-hmm. And if no one comes forward and says, this is my husband or this is my wife, you would get married again. And it would only probably pop up maybe when one of the spouses dies. And then someone else pops up and says, this was my husband, this was my wife. And whole commotion would ensure.
Wow. I'm sure we are hearing what's happening here. So probably this development is actually come for the good in terms of circling and addressing that kind of a situation where everybody is going to be entered into the system, and they check you before you can be able to get married. They check you in the system and confirm that you haven't gotten married before.
Yes, that's what they now do.
Okay. Then we have got we've got the urban community and we've got the rural community. In a case where people are in the rural areas and they still want to get married, probably they want to go the Chapter 511 route, how can they be helped? What steps do they take to be able to be assisted? In the place, because you look at the in the urban, probably systems are there, they get they go to the courts, trade court, and anywhere else. But then in the rural areas, how can they be assisted?
I think the lucky thing that we have is that in most of our rural areas and in our communities, there is a magistrate court that is normally set up within a particular district. So it's the same system still applies. They have to go with the set requirements of passport size photos, the copy of their IDs, even a copy of your birth certificate, just to show that you are a local and you are born here, and you advertise within that district that you are getting married. Your names are put up on a board outside the court, so anyone can just come in and just check the names. And if you see that, no, this is my person, what's happening here, you can go and then lodge a complaint, and then obviously the necessary processes will be done. But the good thing is most of our districts have a magistrate court, so anyone can go to a magistrate court and just go and register for their marriage license.
Okay, thank you so much for that information. We have scenarios where you've given us 2 different kinds of marriages, the Chapter 511 and the customary one, where a man can marry as many wives as he wills. What are the implications of these different kinds of marriages when it comes to divorce? What are the implications of these? What effects are they? How different are they when it comes to the issues of divorce?
Well, maybe before we come to the issues of divorce, the Chapter 511 marriage is governed by our Marriages Act, which is Chapter 511, which just requires both of the parties to consent to the marriage and to have a witness. So it's just you, your fiance, and whoever is going to be your witnesses who will sign that they've witnessed the marriage being official. And then the Chapter 5071 is the African customary marriage. Payment of lobola is a requirement in that one. So when the parties go to the magistrate court, the magistrate would actually ask the guardian of the woman whether any lobola has been paid, how much was paid, and how much is still outstanding. Okay. And that first wife, she's issued with her own marriage certificate, which reads first wife, okay, and states all the details relating to the lobola requirements. Second wife gets her own marriage certificate, which states that she's the second wife. Kusiya kusiye.
All right.
And then when it comes to a civil marriage, payment of lobola is not a requirement.
Okay.
All that is required is that my girlfriend and I agree that we are getting married. We get 2 witnesses, we go to court, we get married. Siyathutsha sembuyelo makoti.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I'm sure a young man who's watching is saying, I'm going for chapter 511 because I don't want to pay lobola. I'm hearing that there are discussions about the issues of lobola, that there could be a bill where people are no more obliged to pay lobola for them to marry. If you could shed a little bit of light on that, if there is anything substantial as yet.
Okay, I think maybe that comes from the discussions that were done with the marriage bill, which was discussed a year or so back.
Yes.
That bill unfortunately lapsed, but what it was doing, it was consolidating all of the marriage acts. Like I've said, you've got chapter 511, which is for the civil marriages, and then you've got chapter 507, which is for the customary law marriage. So what this bill wanted to do was to just consolidate it into one act, which will then govern how all of our marriages in the country are done. So with relation to the payment of lobola, I think that one is still up for discussion, because the issue that will always arise is being people of an African background. It's part of our culture. I cannot just get married without having gone to my in-laws and done the necessary customary rights as required. But like I said, with 511, lobola is not a requirement. It's just that I believe because of our different customs, we still have blended what is with civil with part of our traditions. And I cannot really say that act is going to be there or not, because it's going to, obviously what's going to happen is it's going to be discussed by the parliament, and even there are going to be what we call parliamentary portfolio meetings, where they then discuss with the different communities whether they want that to happen before it is actually made into a proper act.
Okay. All right. So probably people have got to keep their ears on the ground to hear when they are coming into their community to come and discuss about that, so they can participate and air their views in relation to that, isn't it?
Yes, that's very important, because the next thing, what will happen is you'll have an act, and then people will be like, but we were not advised.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, keep your ear on the ground, and you hear whatever meetings that are there. Recently, I think this coming weeks, there's going to be, though it's off topic, there's going to be a budget portfolio committees that will be going around the country, and I saw in the newspaper they advertise. So keep your eye in the newspaper, and you'll be able to see something that might interest you, where you can go in and have your voice heard.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We now come back again to the issue of divorce. We're saying this is what is happening. This is the reality on the ground. People get to a point where they get to divorce. Of course, when we come in the church context, it's quite an issue, the issue of divorce. However, the reality on the ground is still people get to divorce. We're saying, what are the implications of divorce there when in relation to these two kinds of marriages?
Okay. When it comes to divorce, if you've been married under Chapter 511, a civil marriage, or the one where you either got married in church or at the magistrate court, if you want to get divorced, you have to go and file your summons at the High Court, where the High Court is the one that will then deal with the issues relating to how your property is going to be shared, who is going to remain with who's going to have custody of the minor children, and relating to issues of the maintenance for the children, and in some cases the maintenance for one of the spouses. This can be either the man or the woman. It goes either way. And then when you're looking at Chapter 507, the customary law marriage, in most cases, what the magistrate court, wherever it is sitting, can deal with the divorce, because your marriage happened at the magistrate court. That's what the Act says. But you can also, if the magistrate court is far, or you feel that the property that might be shared is above the value of what the magistrate court can handle, it can then be done by the High Court.
Okay. So somebody either can go to the magistrate court, or they can go to the High Court for settling of that.
For settling of a customary law marriage, it's the magistrate court or the High Court.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter. Though sometimes the judges would say if they prefer that those be dealt by the magistrate court, because those are the courts that normally have jurisdiction with African customary law marriages.
Okay. I'm still on the issue of divorce. It happens in such a way that there's got to be someone who files the divorce, where you find maybe it is the man who is filing the divorce, or it is the woman or the wife who is filing the divorce. What are the implications of that? If it is the man that is filing the divorce, is it him who has got to pay for the, because I understand the expenses, that there is a charge that you have got to pay for filing a divorce. Is it both of them that make the payment, or is it the one who is filing for the divorce? What actually takes place?
Okay, what normally happens is the one who institutes the divorce is the one who pays for the filing costs at the High Court or the Magistrate Court, depending on which court they are having the matter done. And then also there's the issue that once you file those papers, they have to be served on the other party. And service is done by the sheriff of the High Court. There is also an amount that is paid at the sheriff's office for them to go and pay, not necessarily pay, but to go and serve the other party. And then as you go forward, you will not. There'll be some further processes that need to be filed or served, depending on how the case goes. Sometimes you have couples that would actually agree that the marriage is over, and they consent. The other party will consent, and in such a situation, the parties can then enter into what we call consent papers, where they specifically state that summons have been issued. We have seen them, and I have no issues with the issue of divorce. May the court grant us the divorce. And then the other issues, whether it comes to the custody of the children, how the property is shared, if both parties have agreed, they state it in that consent paper, and then it is filed in court together with supporting affidavits.
Okay. Well, there is more that we're learning here, and there's still much more that we have to learn. I want us to take a short break. We'll come back just now. Please don't go away. We'll be right back. We are talking about issues of marriage, divorce, and remarriage, and this is Asikhulume Talk Show. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are here in the Asikhulume Talk Show, and we are talking about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Thank you so much. I have got in the program Mr. Dube, who is helping us understand these things. Today you are receiving so much information that I believe will empower you. You get to know what to do when you, whatever situation you'll be faced or you'll be going through, you would get to know what you're supposed to do. And so, thank you so much for staying tuned. We are continuing, Mr. Dube. We were talking, before we went to the break, we were talking about the issue of divorce. As an organization, as Legal Resources Foundation, you continue to help people and advise them on different situations that they face, and they come to you for advice. when people come to you for advice in relation to divorce, maybe it's a wife who's saying, I want out of this marriage, but I'm afraid of coming out because my husband is the breadwinner and I've got nowhere to go at home. They wouldn't accept that I'm divorcing. Someone could be in that kind of a situation. Or when people come to you for advice in divorce, how do you handle that? Do you have somewhere where you refer them to, or they can be given counseling there?
Normally what happens is when a person comes through and they're asking, inquiring about issues relating to divorce, you have to ensure that when you're speaking to them, they are certain about what they want. And then regarding counseling services, it now depends if they are willing to actually have those sessions done, and then we can refer them to other organizations. I think there's Contact, there's SASA projects. Those handle the issue of counseling. And then when it comes to issues relating to you spoke about maintenance, the man being the breadwinner. In terms of the law, there's an application that can actually be made to the court that pending the divorce, or even after the pending divorce, the husband or whichever spouse is the one who's working should be paying maintenance to the other spouse until the divorce is finalized, or up to a certain number of years. But it depends on a case-by-case basis. It's not every case which can get that order from the court.
Okay. I understand to file a divorce is quite expensive, and to get you, the lawyers, to handle the cases is quite an expense. And and it seems when it comes to divorce, the expense is a bit high. You clarify that. Is it because it's a way of trying to discourage people from divorce, or it's deliberate? You can help us on that aspect.
When it comes to divorces, I think as lawyers, we are governed by the Law Society of Zimbabwe, which actually sets out the tariffs that apply for different cases. We don't necessarily, I don't think it's an issue of trying to discourage people, but it's just an issue of the tariffs that are there. But if people or a person cannot afford legal representation, our organization, Legal Resources Foundation, as part of some of the work that we do, we actually can provide legal services for people who cannot afford legal representation. And then, though we will do a means test to determine whether you fall within the bracket of people that cannot afford legal representation. And then there are other organizations. There's the Zimbabwe Women's Lawyers Association, and then there's also the Legal Aid Directorate that also provides legal services for a certain amount, though it's not as the same as legal practitioners. And I think a person can actually have conversation with the legal practitioner if they feel that they cannot afford, or they want to pay over a certain time. There are what we call contingency fees that can be entered into with particular legal practitioners. It's like I said, it's on a case-by-case basis, so it really depends. It's not an issue that they're trying to discourage, I think.
Okay, because we have thought probably, because after all, we don't necessarily encourage people to divorce, so thinking probably that could be, that's maybe another way that really actually discourages people from divorcing. Because at the end of the day, we don't encourage people to divorce. We encourage people to talk out their issues, get counseling. Like you were saying, there are places where they can get to counseling. Moving on, we want to bring in the issue of remarriage. Now that somehow it has happened that someone is divorced, within the church context, when like we say, that the issue of divorce is quite something that people would not really easily accept, or usually would not easily accept in the church. But then it does happen, and then people get to a point where they want to remarry. What happens when someone is divorced and now that they want to remarry? Are there any processes that they've got to go through in the courts before they can be able to remarry? Or it's just a matter of going through and you marry whoever would want to marry?
The normal process when it comes to remarriage is you need to take when your divorce order has come out, you take your divorce order to the registry offices, where they then also enter into their system that you are now divorced. Because what happens now is, because everything is computerized, you'll note when you go to the registry office, if you want to apply for any document or travel document, all your details will come out, your date of birth, if you are married or not. So if you want to remarry, you need to go and have that system changed, and you get what per se can be said to be a certificate of non-marriage, which will state that you are not married. And that one also applies if you are getting married outside of the country. You actually need to go to the registrar's office in Harare and get a letter which will confirm that you are not married in Zimbabwe.
In a case that you have divorced and you have left the country before you marry, and you are now staying in another country, and now you want to remarry, what happens? Because you're talking about when you want to remarry in another country, you need to get a letter. Is it a certificate of non-marriage here before you can get married? In that case where you've just left before you got married, and peradventure you get there and you find someone and you want to remarry, what's the implication?
The same process applies. You need to go to the registrar's office and ensure that you get a copy of that letter. If you've got someone here in the country, or even your you can get a legal practitioner to go and actually do that letter, where they go with your ID number and even your divorce certificate, your divorce order. Just to show that, so that when they check with their system, they can then clarify whether or not you are still married or not. But if you've been divorced and you've got the order, they will do the letter to say that no, this particular individual is not married in Zimbabwe.
And then another scenario is such that you find sometimes some people, when they're in marriage, you will be having children in the marriage, and you get to a point where you divorce and you now want to remarry, and maybe your children are still young. There's usually the issue of issues of child support, where it gets to be really serious conflicts that we see in families when it comes to that. What happens? Does remarriage affect child support?
Remarriage shouldn't affect child support, because what happens is the moment a case for divorce goes to court and there are minor children, the court always ensures that there's a provision for maintenance for the minor child. So it can either be provision until they are 18 or until they become self-sufficient. So if your child is still going to university, they can still be receiving maintenance from either their father or their mother. And when the mother remarries, it is not the child. The child has not changed parents. The parents still remain the same. It's still Mr. Dube and still Mrs. Dube. So what happens is, if my father or mother decides to remarry and one of them has been ordered to pay maintenance for me, they continue as per the court order. If there's any change that needs to be done, then either of the party can go to court and say the child is now grown up, or he's now working, and or there's no need. I don't need the parent to be paying a certain amount of maintenance because I can take care of the child. But what happens is, the court, as the upper guardian of the child, always maintains that there should be a clause for the payment of maintenance for the children.
Okay, so the payment of maintenance, is it by the husband, or is it by the one who has, in these days scenarios, we find they can be husband and wife, but then the wife is the breadwinner in the house, and there is a divorce that has taken place. in this scenario? Is it always that it's the husband that pays the maintenance, or it can be either of the two for the children?
It can be either of the two for the children. Normally, the parent who does not have custody of the child is the one who pays maintenance. Okay. So if the children are staying with the father, the mother can pay maintenance, or vice versa. If the mother is the one with the custody of the children, the father pays maintenance. Because what the law says is that it is the duty of both parents to take care of the child. So it's not necessarily that only one parent. If it's required that both of them pay maintenance, they pay maintenance. Say, for example, the child is staying with one of the grandmothers, then the parents can then pay maintenance to the grandmother to be taking care of the child.
Okay. And for how long? Up to what age do the parents pay the maintenance for the child? Is it as long as the child is still alive, or there's a certain cutoff age?
Normally, what happens is the payment of maintenance is up to 18 years, or if the child becomes self-sufficient, if he becomes employed, and there's no need for maintenance, then but in most cases, the general rule is until they turn 18, because at 18 they are now considered an adult or self-sufficient. So whichever occurs first, that's the cutoff point of paying maintenance.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. We running out of our time, and we realize we probably would have to cut it off here at this point in time. There were a number of issues that we could have continued to talk about in relation to this issue, because this is quite broad. There are many different scenarios that we see in relation to marriage, divorce, and remarriage. Thank you so much, Mr. Dube, for giving us the information that you have given us today.
No, thank you, Pastor Mhlanga, for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. We want to say that if you've got any questions that you have, especially to the topic that we're having today, that you would want to ask, please feel free. Just send us your questions. You can inbox me on the numbers that are there on the screen. You can be able to send the message even on our page, and give us the comments, the feedback, even the knowledge that you have in relation to these issues of divorce, marriage, and remarriage. After all, at the end of the day, we desire to have a wonderful marriage relationship where two people are able to live well with each other, even together with their children, for those who have got children, and we see happy families at the end of the day. So we want to thank you so much for staying tuned today. May God bless you. You have a wonderful evening. Thank you.